We talked to some Auburn media the other day. They seem to be suppressing the the controversy and just the outside optics of what it looks like right now with Brian Harsin. But my goodness, they got off to a 6-2 start. They lost 5 consecutive games. You can kind of look into those games and see where it's a little more understandable than they just fell off a cliff. But now they're losing coaches and players.
Right.
And when it's a few in this day and age, everybody's losing players. But, man, they're not getting any back. What's going on there, and how could this impact LSU?
I'll get up on LSU big time. There was a lot of kids that ended up going to Auburn at the last second at defensive back who ended up going to Auburn over LSU. Jadarian Rom was committed to LSU for a long time, and Osbury was a kid whose dad is a higher up at LSU who decided to go to Auburn. So I do think there's going to be a lot of schools that are going to be interested to see if more Auburn players enter the portal. Now, what's really interesting as far as Brian Harsin is concerned is, we could talk what we want about the off the field stuff, but there was one radical difference that happened to him, and it happens to a lot of coaches, right? They become cowards. They really do. And all I care about is if you are brave enough between the headset, can you make the difficult decisions to win your team's football games? And when he was on the road in Death Valley, he had just fired the really popular wide receiver coach at Auburn, but he went into Death Valley and won that game. And it did help out that Bo Nix played phenomenally. But the reason why they won that game, Mark, was because they were really what happened against Alabama was the opposite, right? They kind of backed into that win. They had an opportunity to go for 2 and the win, and they didn't do it. And that's the thing. Brian Harsin, the way we view him now would be so different if he actually had won that daggum Iron Bowl, right? But now you decrease the amount of room you have for error when all this stuff is swirling around you, right? If you win, and people will find ways to keep you around. But the thing is, you didn't win that Iron Bowl. The bowl game was a mess, and now you lose both your coordinators, and your players haven't bought in. It's a disaster. And Mark, the bottom line, and I know Auburn fans that watch your channel are going to be really mad that an LSU fan is saying the thing. Auburn is now a basketball school. End of story.
Those are fighting words. Those are serious words for an SEC school outside of Kentucky, of course.
Right. There's nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it. Lean into it, man. You got Jabari Smith. His dad was one of my favorite LSU basketball players of all time. I mean, you got Bruce Pearl, got Alan Green, the athletic director, fully behind him. You're a basketball school, and you got the world-class gymnast, Suni Lee, there. Just admit it. And here's the thing, Mark, with the transfer portal, you can always flip a roster really quickly. You can always, pull a Mel Tucker and get a lot of really good players in and flip it in 1 year. But Auburn, the uphill climb is just too uphill for me, right? A&M is out recruiting you. Alabama's out recruiting you. LSU's out recruiting you. You still have to play Georgia every year as your cross-division rival. I just don't see any light at the end of the tunnel here with Auburn, now with by far the worst coach in the West.
And that's a tough pill to swallow for Auburn fans because they're already situated in a way because of the division, because Nick Saban's a monster and he's in the same state and nobody else has to deal with that in terms of a daily 24/7, 365 conversation, because of the Georgia the constant, the rivalry game cross division, that it might be the most difficult job in college football. I've made that assessment a number of times based on expectation. Of course, Kansas is the toughest, or, pick your team out there in the wilderness in terms of trying to just notch wins. But if you're talking about expectations versus wins, give me Auburn as the answer to that question.
Yeah, easily. And we'll see. I'll say this. Well, let's just say Brian Harsin is like go. once again, I think one move that would make a lot of sense is going back to Derek Mason and just giving him the job, right? If that is what's going to happen. The second thing I would do is, if Brian Harsin is let go, it's just make Cadillac Williams your interim and then see what happens this year. It might work. And then you just go from there. But, that's the thing. It's recruiting is just so different now. And I can't wait to see how this all plays out, right? Whatever is actually going to happen, I can't wait to see what's going to happen, because we have this, and the timing couldn't be worse, right? This is a dead period, right? There's no SEC football news coming out in the next 2 or 3 months even. It's going to be a long couple of weeks for Auburn fans.
Because you can look at it this way. If this just is a normal job that doesn't have the type of public perception and all of that, this would be a very mean and harsh thing to do. A guy does his job for 1 year. It's a pretty marginal job, but hey, let's continue to monitor him and see how he does. And even as a football coach, how many people expected, shoot, I picked Auburn to go 6-6 this year. They did pretty much what I expected. And then I was expecting, of course, go on from there. But the expectations are they want a coach that's going to go 9-3, 10-2 most of the time and compete for SEC championships a reasonable amount of time. If you look at it, what is the probability that Brian Harsin is that guy based on what we've seen after 1 year and this off season? The probability is extremely low that he's that guy. So if you're making business sense, time is money. Time is like a killer in the SEC. If you get buried as a program, it takes a long time to get out of it, even in this day and age, because the competition's so good in the conference and in the division, not because you can't turn it around in other places, but there versus who you have to play. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Is it impossible for Auburn to turn this thing around? No, it's not impossible. It's just really, really hard. And, Brian Kelly got really lucky. When you take over the LSU job, you have so many kids that still want to play for LSU, that want to keep their commitments, that ended up signing anyway to LSU, right? And that's the big advantage LSU has just over, everyone in the West. You have this fertile state where kids really want to play at LSU, no matter who the coach is. So, you give BK a lot of credit for turning that around.